actually goes into matters economy. We also have Edwin Dande. Edwin is known for his premier services when it comes to the real estate, and I'll give him an opportunity later on to introduce himself for those who have no clue who he is. And we also have Johnson Derry. Johnson Derry is executive. Pardon me, I'm struggling with my network tonight. Sorry about that. But Derry is a very seasoned analyst when it comes to matters public affairs, and we'll have him join us in a few. And Derry is telling me he's having an issue joining the call, but as we try to locate Derry on the call, again, I want to just make this correct. Derry is an economic analyst and a corporate governance expert. We'll be having him join the line in a few for now. But for now, let me cross over back to the guest of the night. We'll start with Lady Stella. Stella, good evening to you. I hope you're doing well. An opportunity for you to introduce yourself and give us a general outlook of what you intend to discuss in tonight's space. Karibu.
Thank you, Eli. And thank you, Shabdali and Edwin, for having us here today to discuss on matters economics and what really we are seeing on the ground, or what the ordinary Kenyan is experiencing. So I expect to discuss and disseminate information in terms of what we are seeing as the positive indicators, followed by why we do not see, or we do not feel as common wananchi, the positive indicators as told by the numbers, the several numbers or the several indicators that we will be mentioning, and as well kind of try and have solutions and engage the audience on what particularly they feel and they think should be going on. Thank you, Eli.
Stella, if you can hear me, I quite lost your audio, but thank you so much for that. Let's cross over to you, Francis. Good evening to you. I hope you're doing well, Francis. Speak to us.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me to this conversation. As you said, I'm a public policy advisor. My work is to point out when the policy is going wrong, from the point of conceptualization to the point of implementation. And today's conversation is timely because if you look at the cabinet decision resolution today, you'll think everything is rosy and the macroeconomics are pointing towards a growing country. But then, if you ask any Kenyan, no matter which political divide they support, they will tell you that life is tough. There's no money in the economy. And I think today's conversation is just to tell viewers why there's no money in the economy. Thank you.
Thank you. I think when you talk about money, everybody starts to say it's too tight to mention. I don't know about you, Edwin, but greetings to you. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to the talk.
Thanks, Eli, and good evening, everyone. For me, I obviously like to discuss and tweet about investments, economics, macro, real estate. And I happen to read the site on weekly. I just read it like everyone else. And I think it's 2 weeks ago when I realized that by almost every single indicator, whether it is inflation, it was pointing the right direction, yields pointing the right direction, equities. So I just tweeted and said, okay, why are we complaining too much? When I look at these indicators, they all seem to be pointing the right direction. And of course, given that we are an active people in terms of Kenyans on X, there was quite a bit of what I would call backlash, people saying, okay, we are not feeling these positive indicators. So at that point, I reached out to the group that we always engage on topical issues, yourself and the rest of the panelists, and said, okay, why don't we have a conversation to try and understand why there's a big disconnect between the economic indicators and the actual feeling on the ground. So looking forward to the discussion this evening. Back to you, Eli.
Thank you very much, Edwin. There's a lot of disconnect, of course. We have had different players in the economic field telling us that everything is very rosy. In fact, I dare ask, why is it we are comparing economy and drinks or beverages? Because last time I checked, soda, especially Fanta, is for the sick, whereas alcohol is for those who are trying to fix some things in life that are not working. But our economic Grand Chief Master tells us that's an indicator that we are doing very well. Before we can proceed with our guests, I would love to also have 254 give us his expectation of the talk, and then shortly I'll be able to bring Derry on the call.
Evening, Eli. Great to have a chat with you again, as well as Edwin, Sharp Daily, of course, Francis and Stella. Today, I think I'll carry a bit of two hats. One of it will be to speak from a common Mwananchi perspective as a daily Kenyan in my everyday experiences, in terms of what I engage with in the market. But also my anticipation is to also give some insight from my profession. I work in the manufacturing space, so I do have an idea about the kind of policy that influences in terms of packaging. So for some of the products that you consume in your houses, some of the packaging that is manufactured locally, I do have some insight into that as well. So there are a few policy changes or suggestions in this new tax amendment laws coming through that will, of course, play a factor into, or have played a factor into why the common Mwananchi is not feeling like things are happening as all the other indicators are. And perhaps I'll also give an insight into probably the next maybe 3 to 6 months foresight that we're having in the manufacturing space, and also some insight into some of the happenings in the manufacturing space, having a lot of some manufacturers who are about to leave the country at the end of the year, which of course is going to impact the job market, and of course it's going to impact also product and competition and what you see on the supermarket shelves. So I'll work on two hats today. Hopefully, I'll engage also the speakers to also find out their opinions about what's going on. But thank you again for the space. I think it's good for the listeners and the speakers to share their thoughts, and then perhaps maybe we leave today having much more brilliant understanding about why Kenya is in the state it is in, and possible solutions for our future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, 254. I just want to confirm if Derry can hear me. Derry, give me a sign that you can hear me. Good evening to you. Derry, if you can unmute and proceed kindly. All right, we'll come to Nderi in a few, but thank you so much, the rest, for making time to be here. And the conversation begins now. You can tweet us at, that is at Edwin Dande. Actually, let's just get that handle correct. Edwin, that is EH Dande, that is the handle. And we have at the Sharp Daily, we also have at Stella Swakei. And we have one interesting gentleman here who calls himself Francis Wanjiku, but that is at the Njoroge. And you can tweet me at Likuyani Eli as we have the conversation. Let's start off with you, Stella. We had quite an interesting year, and things seems to be rolling into place. I don't know if from your age, you can be able to demystify to us, how well are we doing?
Thank you, Eli. I hope I'm not breaking, because I think I'm also having internet connections. So can you hear me?
We can hear you, Stella. Kindly proceed.
All right. So in my view and what I have experienced, I have seen a couple of green shoots. And myself, just like Edwin, I have also been treating a bit of what I'm seeing as positives in the current economic environment. So I can mention, or I will mention, 3 of them. And number 1 is on interest rates on government securities. We are seeing the curve, the yield curve, which normally outlines or highlights the yields on all government securities from the lowest or the shortest tenor to the longest tenor. And this has been a major win, I'd say, because for long we've been locking, or the government has been locking very costly debt. And you get to see that costly debt is again what drives up the debt servicing cost. And again, this trickles down to the government trying to raise more taxes so that they will be able to cover this. And the problem with this has been most of our money, or more like, let's say roughly 70% has been going to debt servicing, and we've been left with a very little portion of our revenues to fund our development expenditure, our recurrent expenditure, which again has been complemented by borrowing. And you remember, or you recall that debt has become one of the biggest challenge that our country has, or the fiscal space has had. Number two, and Edwin mentioned a bit of it, is the issue of inflation. So on October figures, we got to see a 2.7 annual increase in the prices of goods and services. And we saw a couple of government officials bragging with a number, trying to tell us that, yes, the economy is doing well. We can see that we have an inflation figure that is a 17-year low, or close to two decades low. So yeah, that was also, it's also a green shoot in my view. But then we have to look at it from both sides. Yes, we are seeing that prices have been going low, prices of goods and services have been declining. And again, it's a slow increase. It's not basically, or not necessarily a decline in prices all the same. So we've been insisting on the fact that a 2.7 inflation just shows that the prices of goods and services are increasing at a slower rate as opposed to before, or the months before that we've seen. For example, we had a 3.6 in September, a 4.4 in August, and higher figures in the earlier or initial months of 2024. So the point has always been that prices are not declining, they're just increasing at a slower rate. And it may be a cause for celebration, because a 2.7 is better than a 4.5. So we were at the peak, now we are at the second peak. So I feel like it is a good thing. And as I've given that example, it's better to have prices basically grow by a lower margin as compared to a higher margin, because again, it will continue to hurt our pockets. So I think Kenyans could use a break of prices not skyrocketing all at once. And then number three of the factors that I would like to touch on is the central bank rate, which is basically the benchmark rate that is used by the central bank to anchor inflation, and also it's used by banks or commercial financial institutions as a benchmark to lend money to their clients or customers, and this includes businesses as well as personal loans. So we have seen this rate declining, and the major reason for the decline has been inflation being anchored within the target of the CBK, which is 2.5% to 7.5%. So inflation has been declining to even below the midpoint, which was the target at some point this year, that is the 5%. So it is also a cause for celebration in my view, but then this is a rate that has caused more. It does, or does it trickles down to very many other things. For example, the lending rate for consumers and clients, and a higher rate basically means that banks will lend their money to consumers at a higher rate. So this has been an issue in terms of credit being very costly, which means that businesses and retailers do not have access to affordable capital. So in my view, I may say that the central bank rate has been able to anchor inflation, but then it has raised more problems in return. We have the issue of capital, and we saw, for example, in the August numbers, which are the latest numbers in terms of credit, private sector credit growth, we had a very small or muted growth in private sector growth, private sector credit growth. So yeah, I feel like this is a rate that has had more issues than as much as it has anchored. I think this is an unpopular opinion, but as much as it has anchored inflation, it has led to more issues, including what I've mentioned, and also the issue of costly debt for the government. So I feel like we had more problems. We had a solution to, for example, inflation. The initial causes of price jumps, for example, at the beginning of or mid 2022 thereabout, was the issue of fuel prices going up. So we had the major cause of fuel prices to go up was a rise in international crude oil prices or fuel prices, which again meant that prices for importers, including Kenya, because Kenya imports its fuel, would go up locally. So that was one major issue. And then in 2023, the major cause for inflation was our currency depreciating against the dollar, given that we import most of our products in dollars. So what Kenya Kwanza did when they came in, because prices for fuel were anchored in the previous regime, that is the Jubilee regime, through subsidies. So what Kenya Kwanza did when they came in was remove the subsidy with the explanation and justification that the subsidy was using revenues, or it was exerting pressure on revenues, which again were not enough for us. So that was removed, and then what they did was increase the VAT for fuel from 8% to 16% in the 2023 Finance Act. So all of those things compounded led to a price hike and an escalation of inflation, the local inflation, which in my view, again, it would have been sorted by addressing the causes of the price jumps instead of entirely raising the central bank rate to cure a problem that we may have created in terms of increasing, for example, VAT, as well as having our currency depreciating. So the currency depreciation is another whole story. But yeah, those are my views. I feel like these three things are green shoots, but not much of a cause for celebration. Back to you, Eli.
Joining in via WhatsApp calls. So I have a very different take on what's going on. So I divide general economic policy into three parts. So there's monetary policy, fiscal policy, and general economic policy. So in my view, the low inflation rates and now declining interest rates for me is demonstrates that the Central Bank of Kenya is deploying monetary policy properly. I think there was a change last year in September on how monetary policy is supposed to work. Previously, there was actually no anchor between the rate. It was supposed to be merely a signaling rate, which just generally speaking, will suggest, will tell you if they're raising rates, then they're going to increase money supply and essentially loosen monetary policy. If they're lowering rates, then they're going to tighten. But it was in as much as it was signaling, I didn't think it employed they employed discipline because there was no anchor in the markets. But this since September last year, they put in an anchor. And I think those are corridors that was developed where interest rates should play within, and therefore when they're tightening now, when they raise interest rates, they are because of the anchor, you will see a money supply tightening, pushing interest rates to a certain level, and when they loosen, that means, when they're lowering interest rates, that means they're loosening. And the corridor moves downwards, that means they're increasing money supply. So generally speaking, so the nexus between inflation and monetary policy is essentially that of and if you look at monetary policy from interest rates perspective, then the question is about money supply. So money supply, when you increase money supply, inflation is expected to go up. When you lower money supply, it's supposed to come down, and that will also explain the low credit growth because that was the intention, to curtail credit because credit is part of the money supply. The problem is fiscal policy is running against monetary policy. So you are running a tight monetary policy, but you've got loose fiscal policy. That means when the government is going to the market, it's looking to mop up every shilling it can because it needs the money. Because it's under doing deficit spending. That obviously has an effect of raising interest rates and squeezing out the private sector. Now, the other parts of the general monetary general economic policy is really around regulations and taxes. So again, in fiscal policy of taxes, so the problem with taxes is that they've been raising those. They've been raising tax rates and squeezing out. Essentially diminishing margins. I know some businesses that are running on negative unit economics as we speak. So when margins are gone, that means it becomes uneconomic to pursue certain business lines, or at least the business lines where the margins are thinning up or going negative. And what that means is then you've got shrinking production in the private sector, and that means lower employment rates, and obviously lower investment. So that's the nexus between fiscal policy and the general economy. The other economic policy is just generally around regulations. This government has been adding regulations, essentially making it more difficult for businesses to perform. And then the natural consequence is it discourages investment and production. And then therefore the general economy slows down. So in a nutshell, that's what I'm trying to say is they've got good monetary policy. That's why you're seeing stable rates, lowering interest rates, low inflation, and stable exchange rates. But not everything else will follow because everything around production is being counteracted by bad fiscal policy and bad economic policy.
Thank you very much, Nderi. You're talking about the monetary and fiscal policy, something that we really want to dig deeper as we continue the conversation. I want to cross over back to you, Edwin. You've listened from Swake and so is Nderi. Where do you sit in this talk?
Thanks, Eli. Before I respond, I see some hands up or people requesting to speak. I just thought you would clarify that we will be giving people speaking rights at the end so that they can contribute. So just be patient for those who have already requested. Now, in terms of where I stand in this conversation, Eli, I want to keep it pretty much what I would call ordinary man's language and try to keep it as short as I can. Now, we remember there was a time last year where things looked like they were falling apart. The dollar exchange rate to the shilling had gone all the way to 160, and there was a lot of question whether we were going to default. Now, I think we need to give, for lack of a better word, the devil his due, because there was a group that believed that, look, the default is imminent, you might as well get into restructuring. And I recall David D saying, you keep making things work, you keep paying until you can't do it anymore. Essentially, you restructure only after you default. So the Kenya Kwanza government kept making things work until the Fed then stopped raising rates and the Eurobond market opened and we refinanced the Eurobond, and that changed the story. So default was no longer an issue. The shilling moved from 160 to 130, and with the Fed starting to cut rates or getting into an easing stance, the globally interest rates started coming down. So I think we have to give Kenya Kwanza the due credit that they were able to hold things together until the market opened. Now, the market opening is not their own making. That is Fed's making and a global phenomenon. But once the markets opened, then the Eurobond was refinanced and rates started moving down. And I think that was the flaw in terms of the economy going south, and things at that point then started going north in terms of the indicators. Now, the question is, the indicators are looking positive, but this has not shown up in people's pockets. The plausible explanation, in my view, would be, yes, the indicators are looking up because from the bottom or from the floor, you can only come up, but whatever benefits, whatever dividends could possibly accrue into people's pockets from those indicators are being wiped away by two things. One is job growth, income growth is still below inflation. So if incomes are growing at 2.4% and inflation, even at a two-decade low, is at 2.7%, the job growth or income growth is not compensating for inflation. Now, if we had just left it there, then you could say, fine, I'm neutral. But where things have really hit the ordinary Kenyan is now the taxes. The increase in social security, NSSF rate, the increase in NHIF now shift, and then the housing levy. Those three things, if you just take an average person, and I would just say somebody making 50K, they are losing another 6% of their income. So inflation has taken 3%, even at the two-decade low. Then additional taxes at 6%. So you're talking about 9%. So let's roughly say, for ease of discussion, a 10% hit, but you're only compensating it with another 3% growth in income. So yes, the economy has experienced a flaw, and from the bottom where we were, we can only come up, but that cannot be felt by the ordinary Kenyan because the government is taking it away in taxes. I wish they had kind of gradually brought in the taxes to give people time to recover, but they brought it all at once. And the latest discussion we are hearing is that there's more tax on the way. So for me, I think the biggest reason is just taxes and weak growth in the economy, which is now reflecting as weak growth in salaries and income. That would be my take. Back to you, Eli.
Thank you. I would love to really move quickly before we can have the questions now to the guest panelists. Francis, taxes, an indicator. We were able to manage the FX for some reason, and we can say Kenya Kwanza tried, and the global arena played its play. I don't know where you sit. I would love to hear your opener, Francis.
Thank you, Eli. The first thing, from a legal perspective, the place where this administration has messed up is by not respecting the right to property. The economy or a government exists to protect property rights. That's the fundamental reason why you have the state. That's the fundamental reason why you have laws. That's the fundamental reason why you have a judiciary. You are supposed to, as a government, you exist to you protect the right to property. So what did this administration do to violate that right to property? When you decide to implement taxes which are even more than what the person is taking home, that by itself, it's almost equivalent to stealing someone's payslip. So that's why Kenyans are saying, hey, my payslip is looking like something else. When it looks like a receipt in the supermarket. By the time you look at the deductions, there's so much. Today I was looking at the EPRA guidelines and on charges. We are paying 180 per liter of petrol, and 80 shillings is going to government. That by itself is violation of the right to property, because I I am the purchasing. They're reducing the government itself. Yes, the government is telling me, okay, I have reduced inflation. You can be able to purchase more. But in itself, it's coming back and saying, okay, you need to pay more tax so that the government can be able to carry out its function. And it has been doing this consistently. And the problem is when you don't have a long-term strategy, or you don't have a bigger vision of what you want to achieve with these taxes, then you're likely to find yourself in the same pot where you are trying to reduce inflation. Even if the inflation was high, these people could have still afforded what they wanted, because now you have taken away this so-called SHIF. You have deducted the pay. You have increased. NSSF is now increasing every year until it reaches to its 6% target. So at the end of the day, all these taxes that you're introducing on a pay slip are hinged on a gross basic salary. You don't remember that the same employee you're taxing has a household. The same employee you're taxing has a loan in a SACCO. So at the end of the day, you are taxing also. Remember, you're also including a housing levy right now. The same person is also paying rent. The same person is also paying for a mortgage. So you end up having individuals. You have a workforce. Yes, you have a labor economy. But then, what does this person take home? It will reach a point that even people who are employed will even see employment as a baggage in itself. So that by itself is a basically the government is giving you with one hand and taking it on the other hand. So that by itself is such something that the government needs to decide on how to move forward. Number two, the way the government is approaching the issue of unemployment is just it's making me sick, because the government wants a productive economy. It wants the economy to have jobs, but then it's putting policies which are anti-employment. I'll give you an example of the security sector. You have seen that G4S has announced layoffs. On the one hand, the private security regulator, said, "Oh my God, these guys are announcing layoffs, and the unions are saying nothing." So and on the other hand, our economic chief policy, David Day, is saying, don't worry about G4S, it's an upper class thing. These guards will find they're supposed to suffer in this Kenya Kwanza economy. Therefore, don't worry about them. It's an upper class job. So you are having a government that is speaking from two sides of the mouth. Is a guard job important or not? You need to tell us. Is it important? Number two, the private security regulator has been messing up that part of the economy, and I'm talking like this because I deal with this sector of industry as a lawyer. So what they did in the first place, they told employers, you need to raise the minimum wage for guards. You need to keep up with the regulation. So what happens? A guard that you are paying, let's say for instance 25,000 or 30,000, you now have to pay them 45,000. And if you don't, they get rid of your license. So what do you do as an employer? You comply with the regulations. You give this guard 45,000. Then what do you do at the end of the year? You cut down the numbers, because that's the only way you're going to comply with the regulations and still maintain your license. So the this the government is it's a huge bureaucracy, and one way of it is to tell government, don't interfere with business unless there is really need to. Because now a guard who was happy receiving 30,000 has received maybe 45,000 in 6 months, but now in the next 1 or 2 years this person will be out of a job. So is the government really helpful to the economy or not? It's destroying the economy. So on my last point regarding the right to property, you have seen the Catholic bishops speak today, and the government is very unhappy. So although the press release had so many items of concern by the Catholic bishops, let me just point one. The Catholic bishops are worried about the sustainability of the healthcare mission hospitals. That's their main worry. You have mission hospitals, you have employees, you have suppliers, but you're not able to pay them because this Ruto government closed an HIF without paying bills, spending bills. So what do you do as a church? You raise it up in the national media, you put it together with abduction, you put it together with the lies, but your main concern is just the government protecting your right to property. What the government owes you as a hospital is your right to property. It's your money. You're not begging the government to pay you your bills after you've provided a service. So how does this involve the larger economy? It's the NHIF bills are just one part of the economy. We have people, we have county governments who have not been provided with their disbursement since July. We have a number of staff. You've seen lecturers out on strike. You've seen the young doctors who are posted in August. They have not received their salary until to date. So we are carrying over a problem, and we are telling people everything is well. Inflation is good. Interest rates are good. Yet these people do not have the money that belongs to them by government. And then at the end of the day, every coin that the government pays you that is due to you, you have to pay another supplier. You have to pay your employee. So this thing has created a circus, and that's why people are mad at this government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Looks like Francis is very unhappy with the current administration, and now we want to get into the nitty-gritty of this talk. You know, when I saw some of the local dailies, and to some extent acknowledging the fact that there's been enough effort to support the economy, we have to agree that if you were to analyze this from the aspect of agriculture, which is one of the single sector in the country that adds a very big value to our GDP output, we can say, or should we say that it has been able to rise up, and that's why we've listened from people who are in charge of the economy in the country telling us everybody can afford a meal, people to afford the basics, and those ones that are complaining, looking at the laying offs that are happening, it's because it's a luxury sector. Edwin, would you consider that a big indicator that we are doing well? Because it's only the luxurious things that we are doing away with. Agriculture has picked up, the government did well with the inputs. I don't know where you sit with that, Edwin.
Thanks, Eli. With regard to agriculture, when I talked about the KK administration, at least we got to give them credit for holding on until markets opened. I think there was another stroke of luck. After several years, I think it was like 5 years of drought, the rains came back, both the short and long rains. And yes, we can't take away from them the credit that they actually did the fertilizer program, though it had some issues in terms of fake fertilizer. So there is food on the table. We cannot run away from the fact that sugar prices have gone down. Cost of unga has moved from like north of 200 to some brands south of 100. So in terms of agriculture, cost of food from the shamba, that has gone down, and that credit we cannot take away from them. When D was, I don't know whether he was serious or joking, when somebody asked him, but how come, how do you explain people drinking more sodas? And he said, but the cost of unga is down, so the extra money is going into buying sodas. So from an agriculture perspective, and just putting food on the table, things are positive. But of course, the fundamental issue in agriculture is that we won't go far until we are able to take our agricultural produce, whether it's coffee, tea, avocados, and process it where we can get a better bang for our buck, so to speak. That would be my take.
All right. So I maybe if I can have Wakili here for a second. Wakili, you are partly into agriculture. We listened from farmers from Rift Valley who were arguing that the amount being offered by the concerned body to actually get their produce, it's not commensurate to what they have put in as input. What does that translate to according to you, Wakili?
Yeah, so currently I'm in Eldoret, that's my hometown, and the price that has been offered by National Cereals, I think it's around 3,500. national cereals also has capacity on how much it can handle. And usually when you look at how the supply chain goes, it's the large scale farmers who drop their maize or their cereals first. So what happens? The farmer who is in the rural area cannot afford to hire lorries to go to cereals. So for that farmer, the most important thing is to get the maize out of the shamba as quick as possible and off to the market. So if the cereals is offering 3,500, and you'll assume a broker is taking the maize to the cereals, you'll offer, as a broker, you'll offer the farmer 2,500 or even 2,000, because you're taking the risk of transportation from the farm. You're taking the risk of drying the maize, and also other incidental costs, including cess by counties. So farmers are feeling the pinch, because normally the cost of that. For you to make a profit on that bag, I think you have to sell it at 4,000, especially if you are a small scale farmer. So what the government is doing, the government is looking at the consumer and saying, we have provided you cheap unga, and you have the purchasing power to afford cheap unga. And even I think right now even wheat is quite cheap in the supermarket. But then what does it mean for the farmer? This farmer has toiled for 3-4 months. They have spent money, although they have had subsidized fertilizer. There are some who do not have access to that subsidized fertilizer. These farmers also have loans. They have kids that they school. So at the end of the day, the same people you are trying to save from poverty are they're in a cycle of poverty. And then, once you supply, even if you supply to the national cereals will pay you after some time. So there is also the cost of money, the cost of government keeping your money, just like KCC, just like KTDA. If someone stays with your money for 30 days, what do you expect? You expect interest. That is something that the government does not pay, unless you are Kenyan or someone else, or Adani. So the plight of the farmer is that I don't think, yes, this regime will give you cheap food. Of course, they'll give you cheap food, and but at the end of the day, what does it mean for a market economy? A market economy is one that the government does not have so much control on the price of the item. And I'm sure this regime argues that agriculture is controlled all over the world, including in America, so why don't we? But then you don't realize that the government controlling all other aspects of the economy, including the fuel industry, which is a major input in agricultural produce. So you have a 80 shilling tax on every liter of fuel, the same fuel that is being used by tractors that farm machinery. So at some point, I listened to the president and I asked myself, does this man know what he's talking about? Because one of the ways Ruto can prop up the agricultural economy is by making sure that fuel is very cheap. And the only way to make fuel is very cheap in this country is by reducing at the levies by half. If today the government sits down and says we are going to reduce the taxes imposed on fuel by 40 shillings, you will see the agricultural sector prospering. And that's the problem, because as I said before, the government is giving you one thing with one hand and taking it with the other. And some of the questions I've been asking myself from a policy perspective: why is the government buying maize? Why don't they let people who deal with maize to buy maize? If they want to offer a service, they can offer storage services. Secondly, is the question of why does government want to be setting prices of some food items and leaving the others? So if the government is buying from maize farmers, why isn't it buying from avocado farmers? Yes, and if KTDA is making so much money and it can afford to pay farmers bonuses, why is the government providing KTDA with fertilizer? So the government has to sit down and form a coherent policy when it comes to the support it gives agricultural farmers, because it cannot give you free fertilizer and the same take it away through fuel prices, at the same time take your right to property through cheap agricultural prices. So if once they come up with a policy, then I think that's the way forward in terms of supporting agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you, and very much connected to what you're saying when it comes to agriculture and the input and the amount that comes with it as a plus for all farmers who are toiling. And we actually want to appreciate farmers who do their very best to contain this. But you there at the household, are you feeling the impacts of all these things that these gentlemen are discussing? Just to be sure we have Nderi online. Nderi, kindly confirm to me you can hear me.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Awesome. That looks like it's workable. So do you want to make a quick comment before we proceed, Nderi?
So I just to reiterate. Sorry.
Say again?
The line has an echo. It's messing with me.
All right.
It's messing with me.
I'll sort that out in a few, Nderi. And again, Nderi has been having issues accessing our X spaces. I don't know what happened. Dande, do you have a better solution to this? Probably you have to talk to your friends. But in the meantime, send in your questions. We'll be looking into them in a few. 254, your hand has been up for a while. I will give you the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Eli. I just wanted to correct one notion, and I'll frame this conversation based on what Wakili has been saying and what Dande has been saying. So one, I'll speak this from a manufacturer's point of view, or people working in the manufacturing space. So I think when people discuss economic policy, I think it is very important for the common mwananchi to understand it in a language that resonates to them. Because sometimes when you talk about indicators in the economy, for a large majority of the common mwananchi, some don't understand what leveraging of currency is, and all these things that are involved in economic policy making and fiscal policy. So I'll try and frame it in the best, simplest way. I think I look at it from my perspective. So one, just to disagree with Dande, I don't think the Kenya Kwanza government actually did a good job, specifically with the economy. I think what they possibly did is hedge their bets, because the reality is the so-called Eurobond that they took to stave off the default of this loan is kicking the can down the road 7 years from now, when this new Eurobond will be due. So the same quagmire they were facing a few months back will come back in 7 years' time. So I really don't think they created a permanent solution. So that's a temporary solution they did. Number two, I think one of the other factors that possibly is influencing the reason why people don't get to see the benefits at their tables or in their homes is, one, people have to understand how the process, all these fiscal policies are affecting some of the major players in the economy. So I'll give you an example and say, for example, in the manufacturing sector, if you're importing raw material, the turnaround time for raw materials is normally between 4 weeks to 8 weeks, depending on what you're ordering or importing from outside the country. Now, you can imagine for most manufacturers, when you're ordering in raw materials for production, you actually have to have between 3 months to 6 months cover of your raw material in order to be able to service your local clients who are also manufacturers for your daily products. Now, this is some of the realities that have happened in this market today, and I hope you can give me some time to explain it. One of the bigger players in the manufacturing space called Beiersdorf, or rather BDF. For the common mwananchi, it's the Nivea products you see on your shelves. So this manufacturer is going to exit this market at the end of this year. So in December, they are literally closing their manufacturing facility. So they've been making lotions, they've been making your roll-ons, they've been making your beauty products within the country. Now, the reason why they are closing down is because they've been making these products locally, however, importing the raw materials. Now, what has happened with the Kenya Kwanza government in the last 2 years is that the duties that they've been imposing in all these tax policies and tax amendment bills that they've been bringing have created a lot of uncertainty for the owners of the business. So what happens is, for a lot of these manufacturers, they've gone into looking at the possible costs of producing things outside this country. And you'll be very surprised for somebody to tell you, for example, to produce that bottle of lotion for Nivea that you buy is going to be 20% more expensive to manufacture it in Kenya than making the same lotion in a place like Egypt, bringing the finished product to Kenya, paying the duties that the country has imposed at 35%, and that product will still be cheaper than manufacturing it in Kenya. And that is specifically the reason why you find a lot of these manufacturers are leaving. They are leaving this country because it literally does not make sense anymore to work in this country. Not because that they don't want to, but ideally for them, the operational cost, you remember the cost of power is actually going higher. The cost of transportation is remaining higher. And I actually posted on the Jumbotron that the fuel costs remain unchanged, which is very peculiar. And this is one indicator that I think is very important for my discussion, because for the manufacturers, globally, the demand for fuel has gone down because a lot of the first world nations have shifted to electric vehicles and sustainability. So the demand for fuel has gone down. The price of fuel globally has gone down significantly, but we don't feel it in this country because of taxes. Now you can imagine when you ship your goods and they land in Mombasa, for them to come to Nairobi in ICD and hit industrial area for some of these big manufacturers, what simply means is that the cost of transporting those containers is still remaining very high. The cost of moving those goods from your location to your customer's location as a manufacturer is also very high. And then the cost of distribution for the finished product to the supermarket is still very high. So all these things play into the price of a product. And that's why you'll find for bottles of lotions, for example, in the supermarket, 6 months ago, they were in the range of 480 shillings. They went up to as high as 700 shillings. Now they've come back down to a possible average of around 580 shillings for the 400 ml bottle. Now, that is very serious. And this is where you'll find, and for the common Mwananchi, it might seem a bit technical, but I think what Kenya Kwanza did is they had a stroke of luck with the opening of the Eurobond. And ideally, that saved them from a current crisis to a 7-year crisis down the line. And the tax pressure that they're facing right now, and the reason why we are seeing these problems reoccurring, I'll even give you a very specific example, maybe to frame it this way. There's these oil manufacturers in the country are facing a big fight with government because government wants to introduce, again, new duties on cooking oil, which is going to push the price of palm oil to very high prices, which means in the next quarter, that is Q1 of 2025, you will expect that prices for cooking oil will shoot back up to where we saw 3, 4 to 6 months ago. Now, all these taxes that the government is bringing on board, it's because they're cash strapped, which is specifically why, even when you hear the IMF has pumped in money into this country, ideally, you can't see anything changing. You can't feel the impact of that money. Because what that money is doing, in terms of an economic perspective, and maybe Stella can speak to this, is this money coming from the IMF is providing government cover in terms of Forex. And that's why the country is able to hold off the value of the Kenya shilling at that 129. And I think today, one of the first indicators is the shilling has started sliding again. So for me, to make it more simpler, or to make it for people to understand in their homes, the Kenya Kwanza government and all these taxation policies and their kind of economic policy they have. In any economy, you can't have an economic policy and a fiscal policy driving in the same direction. And as very many people said, in simple terms, you can't tax a country into growth or prosperity. It can never happen. It will never happen. So what will end up happening is that you'll find most of the major manufacturers will leave the country. Most of job losses will increase, which is why you hear stories of people like G4S letting people go. And essentially what you'll actually find happening is that those job losses that you are incurring, you'll find that People like Kiare might not say it, but the truth is the number of taxpayers is shrinking every quarter. The amount is increasing very minimally, but the number of taxpayers is reducing every quarter, meaning it will come to a point whereby the number of people paying taxes will be struggling to even pay the minimum tax that the government is expecting to operate with. So we'll end up in another quagmire. So I think that helps frame it for everyone that yes, the indicators are saying something, but for me, in a longer perspective or in a long-term future perspective, I don't think it's as positive as people think, because they've been hedging on some luck so far. It's worked out for them as a government, but for all the industry players in the private sector and in the manufacturing sector, things are very bleak because nothing is seeming to be moving to those indicators that make sense. And when we ship in things to be able to make these things, remember, when you buy something at a high price, before you buy the next lot of raw materials, it's a 3-month span. So the prices will not even change for the next 3 months. So in the next 9 months, even if the price drops today, expect to feel that impact 9 months from now. But 9 months from now, the government will change that tax policy again, raise more taxes. Again, what happens to the price of goods? They will not change. They will not come down as expected, simply because there are new taxes that will come in where now all these owners of businesses have to factor in for things like SHIF, SHA, housing levy, and all these things that will create a lot of pressure for businesses to survive. So I hope that gives it perspective. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, 254 for Life. I know my good friend Derry is really struggling to get the call, but we'll do our very best to make sure he's looped in. Stella, things about taxation still coming up, but I want us to go back to where the money is, and that's the banking industry. Is it because entrepreneurs, should I say businessmen or businesses, are having problems accessing money? Or should I call it the debt book? How does it look like, Stella?
Thank you, Eli. And I kind of agree with most of the speakers, including Francis and 254 for Life as well. So yeah, looking at the banking sector and looking at the loan book, it's kind of muted in that the loans advanced to clients are growing at a very, very muted rate or subdued rate. The lines of below 2%. So this tells us that even banks themselves are not lending to businesses and to clients or to retailers. So 2 reasons. One, banks are being cautious about lending their money or putting their money to the market because rates are high and there's a high likelihood of businesses defaulting. Because number one, there's not enough demand for goods, so they may not be able to get back their money. And number two, the cost is very high. So the other reason is that banks are preferring to lend their money more to the government because they are getting better rates there, and it's kind of guaranteed because again they're looking at short-term investment. And if you look at the offerings that the government has been doing, most of them have been short-term. It's only now that they are going back to long-term papers, for example, in the bonds market. So looking at the short-term papers and then looking at the rates, they're quite attractive. So any bank would go to the government, would lend their money to the government. And this is what we keep calling crowding out, because banks are preferring to lend to the government and not to the retailers or to businesses because they may default. And then when you look also at the non-performing loans, which is a good indication or a good factor to look at when looking at whether people are defaulting or restructuring their loans, the rate has gone significantly up. So yeah, those are the major two reasons that banks are not lending to the businesses and to the retailers. So there's that issue or that line in the business amendment laws that the government has brought about. And again, it has been a conversation for a long time of banks increasing their core capital. So this is the amount of money that banks hold at any given time. So there's that plan of increasing the capital, the core capital from the current 1 billion to 10 billion, all through spread out up to 2027. So I don't know what the other panelists think, but I think this will also stifle the lending to the public or to businesses, because it will require banks to hold more of their money and it will basically lead to less money available for lending out to businesses. So that will be my take when it comes to capital. And just to add on what I think Francis was talking about in terms of the government stifling businesses, or the government giving us something with one hand and then taking it back with the other hand, I think we have so many self-created problems in the current environment, which have largely exacerbated the woes that Kenyans have. So we are seeing that the major policies that are supposed to contribute to the ease of doing business are, on the contrary, stifling businesses. So you look at the bills that we have, look at the taxes that are coming through. I will look at, for instance, input prices for businesses. And remember, I keep mentioning that looking at the Purchasing Managers Index by Stanbic Bank, for a long time, the manufacturing and construction sectors have been complaining of higher input costs. And I think 254 for Life has done a very good job in trying and to explain what happens in terms of them buying products or inventory 3 months, and there's that lag effect. So looking, for example, at fuel prices, I had mentioned the issue of VAT. So we had VAT, a double in VAT rate for fuel. And then shortly after, we had the road maintenance levy increased by 7 shillings from 18 to 22, if I remember correctly. So this compounded, and then you get to see, for example, electricity prices in just 2 years, between 2022 and where we are right now. Prices of electricity have gone up by 60% for the 50 kilowatts and by 30%, over 30% for the 200 kilowatts. So all of these things compounded, and then you add on taxes and the complexities that are coming with these taxes in terms of there are those that are required to file daily. There's so many complexities that will require businesses to hire extra human resource amidst an environment where there is no demand, people are not buying stuff. People are just cutting down on their expenditure and spending more on the basic needs that they cannot live without. So I think we have created so many problems as a country, and then the government will try and use taxpayers' money to solve these problems that it's creating itself. So when companies are laying off employees, including G4S, we have the tiles and carpets. We are seeing things like the State House hiring consultants, economic consultants. So what are they for? Because we are not seeing any input or any advantage that they are bringing to us. The policies that are coming about are policies meant to stifle businesses, and then they will come with new tax measures and new tax policies to try and raise revenues. So another thing that will tell you that the ordinary Kenyan is not feeling, or will try and explain why the ordinary Kenyan is not feeling the impact of the positive indicators that we are seeing, is ordinary revenues are growing faster than the economy, and not necessarily at par, which clearly indicates that there are increased burdens on the people who increased tax burdens on the taxpayers. And it will clearly as well show you that there's an economic strain, because there's an over-reliance on taxation as a revenue source for the government. So these taxes, again, are not necessarily used to stimulate economic growth or even create jobs. So you're squeezing and squeezing and squeezing. At the end of the day, at some point, one thing will eventually give, because you can't keep pouring and pouring from an empty cup. You're squeezing, but there's no way you're trying to stimulate economic growth. There's no creation of employment. On the contrary, people are getting fired. So at the end of the day, the government at some point will not be collecting enough taxes, and they will have increased so many taxes which will have blocked economic we will not be thriving economically. So basically, that's my take. Eli, back to you.
Okay, I think I'll take up from there. So what McKinney was saying, I'll pick up from what McKinney was saying, and try to marry with the title of the argument that why aren't Kenyans feeling the positive economic indicators? And I think my earlier argument was this: the only positive indicators we have are those that are linked with monetary policy. In the real economy, we don't have any real positive indicators. And if you look at the positive indicators in the real economy, if you look at banking, you have got rising NPLs. If you look at employment, you've got falling employment rates, even when populations are growing. When you look at tax collection, I was looking at what we'd collected in form of taxes by October 2023 versus 2024. We're only up about 2%. Now, if inflation is for the same period is about 2.75%, that means in real terms, actual tax revenues have been are lower, which probably suggests lower production, lower employment, or let me put it this way: lower investment, lower employment, and therefore lower consumption / production. And the important thing here in an economy is actually production. Everybody is a consumer. If you give me free money, I don't need to work. But the reason I work is so that I can make money to be able to feed myself. So I produce so that I can consume. I believe that's what they used to call the Say's law or law of markets. So we need to really watch what's going on in the productive sectors, and that's why I'm grateful for 254. I forget the name. Sorry, not Bizarre 254. The other guy. He brought out very clearly what I was trying to say earlier. Margins have been eroded, and they have been eroded largely by taxes. Now, whether margins are eroded by taxes or inflation, it's the same thing, because inflation is just caused by government printing money and essentially taking away your purchasing power to use it for itself. So whether the government taxes you directly via income taxes, or indirectly via consumption taxes, or even stealthily via inflation, the idea for the government is to get a little bit more of resources so that they can be able to spend on their side. Now, clearly we are seeing that there's a problem with the real sector, and it's being caused by government. So why is government causing this? The reason is it's running and has been running absurd levels of shall I say expansionary fiscal policy, or expansionary fiscal policy. So you look at what they have been spending relative to what they've been collecting, going back 10, 15 years, you'll see where the problem came from. Because we moved from a level where I remember saying Kimunya in 2007 complaining that there's a problem with our fiscal policy. We're doing it too much. We're overdoing it. And that was in 2007. So in 2008, so the Dusumkata government accelerated on the spending, but it was not irreversible. It was I think sort of acceptable. But we from 2012 Jubilee 1.0 went crazy with deficit spending, and I think largely driven by what you call investment in infrastructure. I think everybody saw the level of indebtedness that Kenya Railways has. And all in all, our state-owned enterprises, I think, are indebted to the tune of 1 trillion, because that's one of the sources of that deficit spending. The other source of deficit spending, of course, is welfare spending. Under Uhuru, I think Uhuru 1.0, we increased benefits on NHIF, which is what made NHIF by the time UDA is checking in, or Kenya Kwanza. I think we were owing, the government owed hospitals something to the tune of 30 billion shillings, because we were clearly spending more than we were collecting at NHIF. And NHIF actually is being closed because it became insolvent. So we went crazy on welfare spending. We went crazy on infrastructure spending, and what we are left with now is huge debts for the government, and the government had two choices at that point. They had the choice of either cutting spending, potentially even restructuring the debt, and putting us back on our way to sustainability, or try and squeeze out more revenues from the economy. So they went the worst possible way. They wanted to increase tax rates, and so what we are doing now is we are trying to increase tax rates more and more on a shrinking tax paying base, which at some point I think will lead to revolt. We've already had one tax revolt. I think there's still another one around the corner. Back to the argument. Do we have positive indicators? I don't think so. The only positive indicators are on the monetary side, monetary policy side. The ones related to monetary policy, exchange rates, interest rates, inflation rates. Everything else related to the real economy is just bad. Thank you.
Well, not so optimistic Nderi there, and his arguments really trying to push us to the next set of engagement. For those who are joining in, we are looking at the economy and we are questioning why are Kenyans not feeling the positive economic indicators? Maybe Nderi, if you may mute to allow us to proceed on. I would love at this juncture to welcome the new speakers who have just joined the call. I see we have Howard on the call, and thank you so much for making time to be here. I would allow you to make your opening remarks on the general conversation, and then invite the next speakers. Did we lose the new speakers by any chance? I think we don't have Howard. Eddie, good evening to you. Welcome to the talk. Eddie, the mic is yours. You want to proceed? I guess not. Let's look at the questions that are coming, or the chat section. I see quite a number of them. Redemptor here is asking us, why are we giving government of Kenya credit for the rains? I think it is divine intervention. As for fertilizer program, that is one of the most dangerous scandals because of sabotaging food security. The impact is undocumented. I would love to hear your arguments on those. Rather, we also have Frank who say Wakili and Dande are a bit biased. Come to KK are gambling. They are gambling. Thank you. You know, sometimes your relatives don't want you to prosper. I think that's what happened to KK, but Nisawa. 254. All the so-called positive economic indicators are cosmetic, and because the government has failed to put confidence in investors on manufacturers with more taxes, where's the buying power and who will invest in such times? This, according to him, are simple lies. Thank you. And I think at this point, I want to bring in Howard. Howard, good evening to you. I trust you're doing well. How is the economy treating you with all the positive indicators?
Good evening, Eli. The economy is treating me as bad as it's treating every other Kenyan. I've listened to Nderi. It was a great pleasure to listen to him, other presenters, as well as Edwin. At some point, I wondered, Kwani economics is more difficult than engineering. But I live by one principle, or I have this one philosophy about economy, that if an economy is doing well, it doesn't need extremely technical explanation to beat the complexities of an engineering class. An economy that is doing well should be felt as opposed to being explained. Sitting back, I'm just wondering why, as we have this discussion, whether we have any future, sometimes even if you are going through painful policies, whether they're fiscal policies or monetary policies or general economic policies, if you have to go through painful decisions or painful policies, you want to go through them having some hopes that at some time things will become better. For our situation, it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't look like that. It doesn't seem like it will get better at some point, because if you look at the way things are happening, someone said that the agriculture sector is looking positive, and I was left wondering which agriculture sector he's talking about. Because if you look at most of the drivers of the agriculture sector, the cash crop, for instance, the crop that we rely on to drive industry, if you wanted to do manufacturing for food and anything else, you should be looking at cash crop. Whether you're looking at tea, whether you're looking at sugar is struggling, whether you're looking at flowers is struggling, whether you're looking at cashew nuts is dead, whether you're looking at sisal. So I'm still wondering, when we say that there are positive indicators with agriculture, are we saying that when it rains and there is a bit of more maize in Kitale, then we say that then we convince ourselves that we are doing better? That shouldn't be. We can only say that we're doing better if there is a specific action by government which is matched by a consequence or a result coming out of that action, as opposed to just a natural occurrence. Because when we move 3 months, 4 months, 6 months into the next month, these natural occurrences will take the other direction, and then we'll be here again screaming and people will be suffering. At the end of the day, if this economy is doing well, even if it's pointing the right direction, we should be able to feel it. We should not overtax ourselves trying to explain it. That having been said, I must appreciate I've learned quite a bit of economics today, thanks to thanks to Nderi and to Edwin, and also to I listened to analyst Stella. Asante sana. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Here we learn every day, and I'm happy engineers are actually crossing over to try and find the nexus between why your buildings are collapsing and the economy is equally doing the same. Well, that's according to the bystanders like some of us. Edwin, when I look at this topic and you guys give this thing very flowery language, I will hear about deep, I will hear something to do with headwinds, and not Edwins, but headwinds. When I head to my village, there's a simple question they ask me. Where is the money? Why don't I see this money? I see 254's hand is up. I'd love to give him an opportunity before I come to Edwin to answer me. Where is this money? Should we allow government to spend? And this is something that Nderi handled with us last week, but I would love to have a second take on that. 254, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Eli. I think I just wanted to mention something, because on a separate note, I was just messaged and I was told, probably in my example, I mentioned a product that is probably considered a luxury product in terms of lotion. So I just wanted to give another example of an indicator of why things are not doing so well. And the reason why I say so is because what the common mananchi might not know is that the manufacturing sector is part of the biggest employer outside of government in terms of the economic framework of this country. And the manufacturing sector in the last 12 months has been going through a lot of turmoil. And one of those bigger players in this particular sector is Unga Group, which is a publicly listed company. Everyone knows it is listed and it's a publicly known company. Earlier in the year, it went through restructuring. It is still going through some very tough waters, and it's one of the companies that provides us with the hostess and jogo in our homes. Now, somebody might say, okay, but the price of unga has come down from where it was. And part of the reason why that price of unga came down was because of the imports of maize. Most people forget that last year, the government increased the importation of maize and sugar in the country. And this is why we have a lot of supply, and therefore the price has been suppressed in the market. Now, what will happen is, for example, if you look at now the agricultural sector, anyone who's from an agricultural zone will tell you, yes, the short rains have come, but they're not as adequate as they used to be in years before. So in the coming year, again, we might have a shortfall again of maize. We might have a shortfall of sugar. And because of the new tax policy that is coming in on packaging, quote unquote, what will happen is the prices of things like unga and sugar and your cereals, the ndengu, the njahe, the maharagwe, they will all go up next year. There's that indication that is going on board. Now, just to touch on what Stella was saying in terms of banks and loaning money to manufacturers, the reality is manufacturers are not trying to approach banks right now to get money. And it is a simple reason as this. When you run a manufacturing company, your net profits, as per se, the money that you take home as the business owner, roughly plays in the region of a maximum of 20% to an average of 10%. Now, you can imagine if you're thinking that you're going to borrow a loan to survive a harsh economic time and you're getting a loan at a 16% rate, and because of all these tax policies, you whenever you bring in your raw material and the next time you want to buy any product from outside and ship it in, you have a new duty to pay. What does that essentially mean? It means that the money you make at the end of the day is going to go lower. So for any manufacturer, it does not make real sense right now to be sitting in and saying, I will want to buy or to take a loan at an interest rate of 16 to 18%, yet I'll be taking home probably 15 to 10% profit, which means you're actually not making any money as a manufacturer. You're barely surviving, which is why you have a lot of industries which have gone down under in the last 3 to 4 years, and some don't even remember some of these companies going down. And this is particularly why. So if you sit down with any business owner who's in the manufacturing space, they will tell you there's a beauty of having consistent tax policy within the operating environment, because it helps you plan and manage what kind of products or how frequent you're going to bring your products in, how you're going to price your products, which provides price stability in the market. And what you'll see happening is, for the middle class in this country, we end up cutting out luxury products because, one, we stop being loyal to brands. We become now loyal to price. So if today I was buying Jogo at, for example, 120 shillings for the 2 kilo packet, if tomorrow I find that Ajab is going to go less by 5 shillings, I'll go for the Ajab. If Amaze comes in at 99 bob, I'll go for the Amaze. And that is the reality of what we're going through, because everyone is sitting in such a very unsafe space, because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. No one in this space, even in this discussion, can tell you that in 3 months from now, our import duties will stand at a specific rate, or our VAT on fuel will stand at a specific rate, because we absolutely don't know what policy we are going to get because of this parliament and because of our executive. So the uncertainty in the way the fiscal and economic policy are behaving also ties into our uncertainty as buyers and even business operators. So that is particularly why you find things are very hairy as we are seeing them today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, 254. Quite a perspective there when you look at manufacturing. Now, I would love to have that question that I asked earlier on to be answered, where the money is, because generally Kenyans believe the moment kuna pesa mfukoni, basi everything else is doing well. But then again, when you go to that shopping cart, what do you find in it? Are you able to fill up with your 10K? Are you able to sit down? And if you are a business operator, how is the turnaround? Is your shelf keeping more stuff, or people are buying as they come in and walk out? I would love to get your perspective on that. And to this extent, I want to, instead of Edwin, because Edwin has been sitting here for too long, let him get more water. The real Joe, how is business and how are you enjoying this economy? Is it bitter or better?
Thank you very much, Eli. I want to answer that in a very long answer. Allow me kindly. I think, first of all, there's a very huge disconnect between positive economic indicators and the lived experiences of Kenyans. And this is just the reality of it. I mean, GDP growth means nothing to me. I'll tell you what, Kenyans will most likely never even feel growth to the GDP. Those are numbers, they are cosmetics. I mean, it's like makeup, making things look good. But I'll tell you what Kenyans will feel. Cost of living. And cost of living is not unga. And I don't know why we most of the times, I don't know why we are sold this idea that cost of living is unga. But even so, essential goods and services, the cost of essential goods and services remains still high. Fuel, I mean, food, healthcare, and things like that. But under the cost of living, do we also look at cost of housing and rental costs? These are costs that we can't run away from. Healthcare, education, transportation costs. Do we look at this when you talk about cost of living? All those Kenyans do feel them. Therefore, Kenyans will never feel these positive indicators. But I'll tell you what Kenyans will feel. Kenyans will feel debt levels. Directly, it will impact them. Corruption will directly impact them. Unemployment will directly impact Kenyans. But even those who are employed, their wages are stagnant and cannot keep up with the pace of high cost of living. Therefore, even those who are employed will still feel the pinch of the economy, as you say. I don't really want to talk about cost of living as being able to buy unga. If I was buying it at 30 shillings last year, I want to buy it at 20 shillings this year. No, I would wish to buy that unga even at 200 shillings. The most important thing is, am I able to afford the unga? Making Kenyans afford this unga is the most important thing. That is the most important thing for me. Unga being 20 shillings does not help. But Kenyans being able to afford this unga, that is the most important thing for me. We talk about agricultural sector, it is the worst. Talk to me as a farmer who's farming who's doing sugarcane farming. This is commercial farming. I'll tell you, in our Ushago, where I do the farming, it is worse. There are people selling land with the miwa in the land because it is worse. They cannot keep up. So that pinch is being felt, Eli. It is not as easy as we may look at it, and sometimes I know Kenyans will be very will be very angered when we talk about, I mean, positive economic indicators and things like that. So that is all I can say for now. But I'm enjoying the discussion. I like the discussion, but we can't give credit to the government. They have done zero work. Thank you so much, Eli.
Just to build on what Real Joe has said, in terms of the question from Eli, where is the money? If somebody asked me that, I would say it's going into taxes. It's going into government largesse, per diems and travel. I had somebody saying that we have a big team at COP29, yet if you talk to an average Kenyan, what's COP29 and what do we get out of it, it's not clear. Of course, it's going into mega corruption that we all know about. And then big government programs. I think one of the unfortunate things about the KK administration is the belief in big government, that government can solve all solutions in things like housing, in things like what are they called, county industrial parks. You don't know, county aggregation parks, you don't know exactly what is going to be aggregated there. So just being able to put a lot of taxpayers' money into these programs that you don't know where they are going. I mean, there was a time we were going to do something on Thika Road. I think it's called mass transit. We painted Thika Road red, spent billions of shillings, and nothing happened out of it. So I think there won't be much change. Yes, the decay in the economy has been arrested by avoiding default, but I don't think there'll be much change until we go into limited government, government enabling, but private sector led kind of development. It would have to be a whole shift. If we can do that, I think there's somebody who said that we just postponed the default. Maybe yes, maybe no, but if we can move into a period of growing businesses from a private sector kind of point of view, of course that would mean a bigger tax base, and then maybe we can avoid that default that somebody saying we've just kicked down the road. Back to you, Eli. And may I request that as we move on in time here, if we can all land our points quicker so that we can get more and more people to be able to contribute to the conversation. Back to you, Eli.
All right, thank you very much, Edwin. And as you correctly put it, kuna struggle. We are struggling to settle debts. We are struggling to manage just the next meal. And I don't know if government persons actually feel this. I was looking at my timeline and I saw one gentleman called Maurice Onyango asking, you people who are in business and you are in town, how is the walk-ins? Do you see people buying tea as they enjoy their meal? Ama wanakuja kunywa chai ukingoja jam ishe? I know we've been doing that for very long times, but is it just some new coping mechanism? People are no longer buying food. But anyway, we know you hate things to do with savings, especially with all the deductions that are coming on your pay slips. We have Shashi, and we also have, the contributions that you make monthly. There's the affordable housing thing that has never been beneficial to most of you. But you want to stay sharp. Check out Sharp Daily as they make an article. Rather, there's an article that you need to want to read about. It's called The Late Starter's Guide to Building a Pension. That is at the Sharp Daily, who are giving us an opportunity to have this conversation on the economic indicators. Do you feel so positive about them or not? Let us know what you think about the conversation. I would want to invite the next speaker, and in this case, we'll bring you Gitonga. Good evening to you, Gitonga. How are you doing? All right, Gitonga decided to land his...
Yes.
Okay.
No. Sorry. I was having a problem unmuting. Thank you. My name is Gitonga. I am an advocate. I have been following keenly, mostly to learn, because this is a discussion on facts. I've had the moderator asking for like anecdotal, how do you call it, like how we are dealing, or the effects we are feeling on the streets and in real life. I would say I agree that the government, or rather, let me call them the government and its apologists, because they are apologizing, are insisting that things are working, and maybe they are working on paper. What really gets to me, or what has what annoys me and has been annoying me for a long time, and it's not really annoyance, it's just a frustration. If you look at the trajectory of, say, banks, I'd say for a long time, banks in Kenya almost operate outside the economy of everyone else. If you look at ever since I'd say the banking reform, I think the 2000s, the mid 2000s, when proper banking, I would say like structures were enforced and put in place, you've seen banks have been year on year. If I say take Equity or even KCB, every year it has always been growth, and growth is good because it signifies maybe good management and what. But if you look at the last, say, 3, 4, 5 years, it has been extremely skewed, whereas MSMEs have struggled or stagnated. Banks continue to make money. The reasoning, because the numbers are available, is because they've pivoted from lending, because interest income is their greatest profit or revenue or income item. They pivoted from lending to businesses and to the populace and to individuals, to lending to government. Now, it is very insincere of this government to say they are pro-business, pro-hustler, pro all of those, but their actions is they're still, sweeping all the money on offer. A responsible government would be putting a quota, or even saying, we will take your money, but we'll not take it at market. If you're insisting on giving us, lend us your money at a certain percentage, because I believe, much as it's a free market, the government can really say we'll only buy or will only accept bids at a certain rate. But they speak with one side of the mouth. They say they are promoting investments, but the policy of domestic borrowing really points to a government that is really not keen, in my view, on empowering people. I believe most of us were starting off, or I remember being around when I think Equity was disrupting the market around, I think, between 2005 and 2011. They'd even pitch tents and lend money, as in they'd be hawking loans, in a manner of speaking. Yeah, I know things have changed, and now we're using like digital platforms and all of that, but the space, the gaps that were left by bank were actually taken up by, I think, digital credit providers for these small loans. And I believe, I can speak from experience and experience of friends that those short loans are exorbitant and they really don't help. Now, for myself, as I learned, is I've noticed that items, even items that never used to be retailed in small quantities, right now unaweza enda kwa duka upimiwe mafuta ya kupika ya 20 bob. That is quite unheard of. I can't remember even 5 or 6 years ago that I don't know what could mean. I'm sure there's an economic word for it, but this kadogo economy has really gone down to that level, where a supplier will buy in bulk, or like a shopkeeper, alafu atauza hiyo kidogo, because that's what people can afford. There are a lot of things that are the government talks about a lot of concerted whole of government approach, but how they execute is really, I can't explain it, because we are going to the third year, and the results are not very promising, or we are having this discussion that we are not feeling the effects of a rebounding economy. By contrast, I think, I don't know if Ugandans or Tanzanians or even the region, I don't know if the speakers here are aware, know whether any other country, Tanzania, or at least not any other country, our neighbors, Uganda and Tanzania, are really feeling the pinch on the ground as we are. But I think from experience, we usually we feel it first, and then maybe they lag, to use economic speak. So I think I'd land there, but I agree that we aren't really feeling the positivity in the economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gitonga. So before I can just engage the other new speakers, I see Daju is there. We also have Brian. But allow me to quickly cross back to you, Nderi. And Nderi, my concern is they have mentioned the issue of the regional economic outlook. How would you compare where we are today and the East Africa community at large, for example? Nderi.
Ella, it sounds like Nderi might be having the connectivity problem again. Maybe we take Brian or Mtufulani to make their points as we reconnect Nderi.
Of these other guys.
Nderi.
But when Uhuru came with their government-driven economic growth models, essentially we're driving with the handbrake up. To a certain extent, these other guys seem to be driving a bit faster because, like Tanzania, I know they have their minerals and whatnot. Uganda is interesting because A, they've got the oil, and B,
and the people are getting problems with connectivity, or people are starting to get to sleep. But if you allow me, I could just say one thing that came to my mind.
For Uganda,
okay,
Rwanda, Burundi, and
Howard, we can hear Nderi.
Nderi,
okay.
Nderi, pardon me, Nderi, for a while we lost you. If you can allow me to, Nderi, just a second. The members could not hear you speaking. So unfortunately, I would love for you to take it up from the top, comparing our current standing in the community, please.
Okay. I think the point I was trying to make, sorry, I'll summarize. Like, I don't think I can remember.
Yeah, you seem to be having a weak signal, Nderi.
Can you hear me?
You may proceed.
Hello? Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. What I was trying to say is the reason why we have seemingly we are going in the same direction is because we are using the same economic growth models. When we had deviances, when Kibaki changed the economic growth model from a government-driven one to a private sector-driven economic growth model, where he actually actively sought to balance the books and essentially leave borrowing to the private sector. I think he also really juiced up monetary policy. I think interest rates went to 1%. Banks were hawking loans in the middle of the streets. So there was a lot of spent in the private sector. Safaricom, I think, was allowed to flourish. Energy sector was fully liberalized. So energy telecom was fully liberalized. Reinsurance was partially liberalized. With Kenya Re listing, I think around 2007. But then when we harmonized and adopted similar macroeconomic policies with the view of, I think, going into economic federation, that's when you see some sort of convergence in bad economic indicators, both in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. Although I think right now, I think it's worse in Kenya than the other two. Although I know Tanzania is also special because it runs a closed capital account, so they have different problems. I think they're experiencing shortage of currency because the government is afraid of market-determined exchange rates, given maybe the shenanigans they're doing in the monetary policy. Having said that, so you will see some sort of convergence, largely because We adopted similar economic policies, but then unlike Uganda, which is very arable and has just discovered oil, I don't think we will be as lucky as they are. Yeah, so that's how I'm seeing things right now.
All right, so Nderi, this is what I'm gonna do. There's a question here. If you can mute to avoid, sorry, Nderi. We are really struggling to have Nderi online, and apologies for that, ladies and gentlemen. But Nderi, there's a question here in connection to what you just presented. There is the aspect of us having very attractive terminologies when we talk about our economy. From where you see it, what are the real economic indicators?
The true economic indicators are this. Do you have stable inflation? Do you have growing employment? Do you have growing real wages? I think for me, those are the. Do you have are people investing? Those four generally will tell you whether you're having a good economy or not. GDP suffers from what we call there's a law, I forget what it's called. When you make a number, a statistic a target, it ceases to be a good measure of what it's supposed to measure. For example, GDP growth is supposed to measure production, right? But when you make it a target, and it creates a certain set of incentives, such that now government spending is enhanced to juice the GDP number. And what that does is that it actually takes away from private sector, because government does not spend in isolation. Government must take from somewhere to give to somebody else. So it sort of takes away from savings and builds into spending, and essentially wasting people's resources, and people are poorer, but GDP is growing. So you can see the incentive there. So we've got to be very careful with what we look at. But for me, the bottom line is, in a good economy, you should be having close to full employment. That means it should be easy for people to get employed. And we can even see in highly automated economies, they still have very, very low unemployment rates. Why? Because in a natural economy, naturally, employment should be available for everybody, and for a simple reason, we have unlimited needs and wants. So ideally there should be something to do for everybody. And then the other issue is in investments and savings. So people should be able to save in order to invest, and if you're able to save to invest, then you have a growing economy, because it's through investment that you boost your productivity. Yeah, so those are the and then you have stable exchange rates, stable inflation rates, stable interest rates. Those are the factors of a healthy economy. So when you look at Kenya, right now we have declining interest rates. We've got stable prices, so low inflation rates. But when you come to the real sector, you have very high NPLs. So many businesses are going out they're going out of business. You have that means skyrocketing inflation, and you can also see that in the tax collection. KRA is having challenges.
All right, thank you very much, Nderi. You say KRA is having challenges collecting tax. Yes, can you hear me? Nderi, I believe you can hear me. Kindly, let's proceed. I will ask you to mute again in order to avoid the feedback. So you talk about the KRA having shortfalls in their collections. You talk about the real indicators, and I hope Edwin question is answered. But I have been looking at statistics by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, and quite depressive, I must say. In a 2022 survey, in a report based on the 2022 survey, it confirms that 39% of individuals in Kenya live below poverty line. You know, there's a line. Then there's a line under your poverty. Before they used to tell us Kenyans can live in $1 a day. I don't know how many those dollars can live today and procure if you are going to buy goods and services. But looking at that, I would love to hear Howard, who said wanted to walk out of the talk, of course, with a lot of respect. Howard, under 39% of households in Kenya below that level, what would you say? As you make your point, Howard, sorry for bombarding you. I guess we don't have Howard. Tell us, okay, you love statistics. Let's see what you can make of that.
Thank you, Eli. So, yeah, I remember someone told me when we were fighting taxes in 2023, the housing levy, which was very controversial, and the VAT on fuel. Someone told me, someone who is not in Kenya, but he's a Kenyan, he told me that Kenyans are adaptive. They can even eat stones. So I don't really know what that meant, but he was trying to tell me that whatever comes, Kenyans are easy to adapt to what is thrown to them, and they make a living out of it. So that was a 2022 report, the one that you've referenced. And I think now, with what we have had and seen in 2023 and what we are experiencing in 2024 in terms of statutory deductions, which have increased way, way high and have eroded the purchasing power of Kenyans, I feel like that figure has increased extremely. Because you see, many people depend, for example, on the formal sector for demand for goods, and even things like black tax, with people back home depending on people who have, for example, a consistent job that is paying. So I feel like the figure has increased, and we may see more people sink into the poverty region because, again, the government is stifling our businesses, and whatever small that we have, it's taking it from us. We are unable to, or our purchasing power has significantly reduced, disposable income has significantly reduced. You look at the PMI again, which I like referencing. Businesses are struggling, and they keep saying that they have a dimmer outlook in terms of businesses expansion, in terms of hiring. There's no, let me not say there's no hope, but clearly there's no hope. Back to you, Eli.
All right. There's no hope for the moment, but I hope we'll be able to cross that when we get there. I want to invite you, Francis, to the talk. If you have been looking through the local dailies, there was a publication by one of the distributors, and in that publication, it was talking about the wash gang, or what was it again? And you see this amount of money leaving and getting out of the economy. One wonders if the home of wash cleaners is Kenya, and we are trying to address the issue of poverty in this country and also stabilizing the economy. And every time there are cases being brought to court, Wakili, there's no evidence. How are we supposed to address these problems? And I know this is more in the legality aspect. I'd love to know your input on that.
Hi, Eli. I mentioned when I began speaking earlier that the basic tenant right in this constitution is the right to property. And what has been happening over the years is when you erode the rule of law, constitutionalism, and all these other democratic values that are contained under Article 10 of our Constitution, when the government itself is eroding those values, then the same applies to the people, because the people and the government are a reflection of each other. So it's not really about how much fraud is happening within the private economy or the government economy. I think the basic thing is how much do we respect the right to property? Because you saw the other day, and this is something that caught the eyes of everyone. When you say you have a public insurance called SHIF and SHA, and before it even does anything, before it even hires employees from, it takes over employees from NHIF to SHIF, even before it even starts providing any basic services, before it even has a CEO or even a board, the first thing they do is to give Safaricom a tender worth 100 billion for it to provide a system. So those are the kind of things we discuss, that you are eroding the value of our right to property as Kenyans, because apart from our own private property, we have public property, which is our taxes. So if you decide to use our taxes corruptly, then it means that everyone else will follow suit, because there's no consequences to stealing. So even like right now, you see the Adani issue regarding Ketraco, you see the Adani issue regarding the airport. It's just no one respects the right to property. So what will happen in the near future? The whole country will be in darkness, like Bangladesh. You'll be told that you have not paid Adani this amount of money to transmit power from one area to another, and this is very common. You hear every day Kenyans saying, "We have built Kenya Power 700 million. We have fined them because they have not paid our bills." So I don't know why government official or the bureaucrats are not seeing 10, 20 years ahead of this problem. So I think observing the right to property is a big problem in this country, and that's why I can tell you the small claims court in Kenya has come at the right time. Right now, I think as we speak, the small claims court in Nairobi is dealing with, we are in November, it's dealing with, I think, more than 20,000 cases in a single year. There is no any other court with such amount of cases. I think the Supreme Court in this country has less than 200 cases in a year. So what does this mean as an economic indicator? It means that at the level where Kenyans are losing their private property is at the level of 1 million and below. So that's why that court is very common. So what does this mean from a public policy perspective? It means if I'm the Attorney General and if I'm a prosecutor, I will go so hard on white collar crimes that target people at the level of 1 million and below, because every economy has a different target when it comes to fighting white collar crime, fraud, and all these things. So if you look at for instance, if you look at the UK, I think UK, when it comes to reporting white collar crime, their target is, I think, 20 million, either 10 or 20 million. So you see, if the only crimes such as the ones which are getting attention from maybe the DCI are at that level, then it means a lot of Kenyans at this lower level are losing money from the what you call the mulot boys, what you call the wash gangs. So, and at the end of the day, even what is happening right now from the national examination perspective, and you see there's a lot of cheating. How much do you think these parents are paying to enable their children to get papers? They're not paying so much money. They are paying less than 2,000, 3,000 shillings to get per paper. So our economy is, yes, fraud is a market economy. It has nothing to do with government. But at the end of the day, the reason why we form government, the reason why we elect a government is to protect the right of property. So if Kenyans are losing money by both government and private fraudsters, it becomes a sin of crime. Yes. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Wakili. And you really seem perturbed with what is happening. But that is not enough. Also today, I was just going through my socials and I made a video being addressed to the president on the issue of dons, where their salaries are either delayed, and once they receive them, even the deductions that they're supposed to be contributing in order for them to get services such as the SHA and SHIF, it's non-functional. Moving forward, this lady went ahead to give her pain in having went ahead to register for Boma Yangu, and on top of that, today as they speak, she has no house, she's paying for the mortgage, and there's no even a slight I say indicator that soon or very soon she'll be able to own one. Property ownership in this country is a big issue. Edwin, you have been in the real estate, you see the trends. What can we do to address the issue of affordable housing? Because Kenyans are paying money and they're not seeing value for money. Probably we don't know who owns the houses, or we are just trying to speak from a sentimental aspect. What's your take, Edwin?
Thanks, Eli. It's a difficult topic because when you say affordable housing, what's affordable housing? There's got to be a definition. I tend to go to the UN Habitat because at least that would be an entity that all of us would say, fine, they have the experience. And they say it's a house that can be afforded by a median income earner. If you go to KNBS, a median income earner is somebody who's earning around 50,000. Then they're supposed to spend no more than 30% of their income in housing. That's the maximum house they can afford. So if I'm making 50,000, 30% of my income, that's roughly 15,000. So the maximum rent I should pay is 15,000, or the maximum mortgage that I should pay is 15,000. Now, if you take the maximum mortgage I can afford at 15,000, even if I get a 12% interest rate. The last time I did that math, I think the maximum house the individual can afford comes to around 1.5 million. So that's the maximum house in terms of affordable house. Then now you go to the developer, the cheapest house they can possibly build, I think, I don't have the numbers of it, but I think it was like a 30 square meter house. That's really a bed sitter. The cost would come to something like 2 million. So there's already an affordability gap. You're telling people get into affordable housing, but the maximum house the country can afford is 1.5. The cheapest house the developer can put into the market, and that's not a house within, Kilimani, Kileleshwa. The person has to really travel at least 1 hour to get to that house. So I think affordable housing in Kenya is a mirage. You'll have to deal with the income gap from the 1.5 million to the 2 million, and that's something the government is not doing. If you are to ask the people who are responsible for affordable housing, I happen to know the PS pretty well. They don't address those issues. So I'm not sure I have a good answer for you. Affordable housing is a mirage. We should actually focus on affordable rental and maybe subsidize people between the amount, the minimum house that you want people to be able to live in and the maximum that they can afford. How do you then subsidize that affordability?
Eli, if I may chip in, Eli, just a minute, if I may chip in. And this is something I said when I appeared on Spice the other week. When William Ruto and his economic team come up with an idea, no one seems to have an idea on whatever they are talking is about. Just 2 days ago, I watched Parliament asking themselves, what is this SHIF and SHA? How does it work? And this was even coming from the speaker himself. So you have gone through 3-4 months of public policy development. You have passed the regulation. You've passed all the regulations. You have even called Safaricom to explain the tender of the technology that they are deploying for this SHIF and SHA. You have approved that technology, but then this is a legislation that went through in Parliament, I think, November last year. Then you come back 1 year later and ask the Cabinet Secretary, how does this thing work? You see that I think whatever Dande is saying about affordable housing applies to every other part of public policy that William Ruto has has brought about in this country. It's not just limited to affordable housing. Look at the shift. Look at the power policy. Like basically, you as a Kenyan, even a person in that industry is stuck and wondering what the hell is happening in this government. A good example is the cement industry. You monopolize the production of a raw material called clinker to one player called Sima Cement and the plant that is in West Pokot, and then you raise the import duty for every other player who has been importing clinker. The effect is that every other player has to buy from one player who is also in the other the supply chain down up to the final product of the cement. So what happens then is because there's only one supplier, even the government cannot even assure you about the quality of cement in this country. And you've seen the reports from KEBS. It has said that the cement of this country is of bad quality, and it's because that clinker is produced by one person. At the end of the day, you look at the price of cement. Cement, at some point, people are buying cement at, I think, is it 400 shillings? Right now, a bag of cement, I think it's 800. So at the end of the day, you ask the government, what are you really doing? And they say, we are creating employment in the cement production industry. But what are you doing down the supply chain? If I want to construct even a simple bed sitter at my countryside home, a Simba, I will not construct it, and that is what will create employment down at my countryside home, and not in West Pokot. So what? Basically, I'm in agreement with Dande about affordable housing. But what I'm saying is that every other policy that this government creates, they do not take time. They do not even want to take time to listen to criticism. They don't want to listen to public policy advisors. They don't want to take time to listen to the people. So that is the net effect. It's confusion all over again.
Confusion, says Wakili. However, let's know what you think about the discussion. We'd love to hear from you. Kindly tweet us at The Sharp Daily is the handle, at Edwin Dande, or if you want, that is EH Dande, and at Ligiani Eli. You can keep afloat with what is happening. And I know you guys do not want to save, and there's no money to save because Nderi has told you so. When you look at the indicators, you don't even have anything to invest. But we love to help you out and start you on a journey toward pension. So you need to grab a copy of the Sharp Daily Guide to Building a Pension. It's actually available on the Jumbotron. Look at it and give us your feedback in the chat section. In the meantime, we are almost coming to the end of the conversation. Our intended purpose was to have this for 2 hours. But I guess just like Shah, we had teething problems, but unlike them, we actually sorted them out. Derry, I'll be coming to you in a few on the same. Let's now hear from Mtu Fulani. Good evening to you. Mtu Fulani, can you hear me? Good evening. All right, Mtu Fulani not able to answer the call. Brian, if you can hear me,
hello,
the mic is yours.
I'm available.
All right, you have 3 minutes. Proceed.
So I just had one question, or rather one or two issues to discuss. Sorry, nimeanza bila salamu. Hello, everybody. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're doing well this Thursday night. Hope everybody is okay. So I have two issues to ask on this space to Kenyans. I'm not very economic savvy, but I answer this. I'll talk as a normal Kenyan going about their business. So this issue about, for me, where I see why there's no money flowing as much as the economic indicators are looking good, it's because government is taking up all the money. There is no access to credit because who is going to take a loan at 20+% to do what business? You'll be basically working for the banks. So what people are rather doing, people who can, wale wako na uwezo,